the aware, the all-powerful. What he's trying to say is that this majesty exists from Allah, is present in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the gem that we have been given, the treasure that we have been given is this ubudiyyah. That actually we are just an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This entire journey is helping and allowing us to recognize that what our true state and our true relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, that we're His abd. And what is an abd? An abd is somebody who recognizes that they don't have control over their life. They don't have control over what happens to their life. They don't have control what happens to their wealth. They don't have control what happens to their kids. They don't have control what happens to their job. They don't have control over anything in their life, and they put that trust and obedience and that entirety of the commands into the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who is in control. Then there is the way that all of that manifests. So an abd, when he recognizes all of these things, the manifestation of all of that is their ibadah. Is that I recognize I am so weak that I need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is ghani, and how do I thank Him for giving me the ability to recognize this? Is I just engross myself in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I engross myself in getting to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I engross myself in conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because one day there's going to be a time that I will be with my beloved. That I'll be there. And everything will be fine, and then all of this I can do whatever I want. So what happens is, initially when you use these words of ubudiyyah, when you use these words of the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you use these words of submission, they're actually used as a very negative connotation in this world. Very negative connotation in this world. But actually when an individual realizes that whether they're not a slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're a slave to something else. Whether it is their wealth, their ego, some part of the dunya that ties them down. Once you free yourself from that, and then you become a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you internalize being an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you actually are free. That's the moment where you become free, because you realize that you actually were never in control in the first place. The one in control was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Al-Ghazali in the Ihya in Kitab al-Tawakkul, he says that the highest station of tawakkul is that a person feels himself to be completely owned. It's like, wait a second, wouldn't it mean that this is a more restrictive state? If you're saying that I'm completely owned, then wouldn't it mean that I am restricted in some way? But actually, when you realize that we are all completely owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the soul starts to become free. And so he's emphasizing this point. In the station, the servant's very helplessness becomes the clearest mirror of divine power. Because you're just saying, Ya Allah, you have the power. You're making this conscious recognition in your mind and your heart and saying, Ya Allah, you control everything. You control what I'm going to be when I grow up. You control how long my life is going to be. You control what I'm going to become. You control what my spiritual benefit is going to be. All of that is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's interesting, in Mufti Abdul Rahman Ghera, he mentions this, is we live in a culture that confuses the spectacular with the sacred. So we expect that the person who's going to be the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have to be charismatic. They have to be people who are constantly, in the public. They have thousands and thousands of people listening to their talks. They're there, they command rooms, have this aura around them, that as soon as they come into a room, that everybody looks at them. We think that those are the awliya. And they may be, some of those may be. But he's saying what the actual true awliya is actually the total opposite of that. And he says the very ordinariness of the wali. The wali can be somebody who's eating, sleeping, in need of something, but there's all of those needs that they have, it's a divine veil that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put to hide their wilayah. So it could just be a normal person. Any person walking down the street could be a wali. So then remember what we talked about yesterday, you might think it's contradictory. We said, you told us that you can't go from point A to point B and jump from all over. You have to go through this whole process. But then you might say, okay, well, I'm an ordinary person. I go to work every day. I go to school every day. I'm trying to just live a normal life. How do I become a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I don't have time? That space doesn't exist for me. But so if you remember, we talked about was the person who is now going from A gets to B, and then is actively involved in doing some level of public khidmah of the deen. Okay? That doesn't mean that the only way to get wilaya is to do some type of public khidmah of the deen. There are many avenues to wilayah. There are many avenues to becoming a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go through all of it, but there are certain stations that are present in there. So for example, you go to work every day, but your free time, you spend, whatever you have, you wake up for tahajjud every day. Before going to bed, you make sincere dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You forgive everybody that has harmed you. Or you ask for forgiveness for everybody that you have harmed. You try to give sadaqah as much as possible. But every single day you are doing something to build this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every single day you have this time of solitude that people know, do not bother me during this time, this is my time with Allah. And you build that time out, whether it's your dua, whether it is this fikr that we talked about, that we'll come to just a little bit again. So all of those things become important. So I want to make sure that we didn't cover this. Okay, so I'll just cover it now. So this fikr that comes in an individual, this fikr is this contemplation that you do in silence, that you look inside yourself, you think about what your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, you contemplate, okay, what did I do wrong today? Why did I do it? And when I did something good, did I do it for the sake of Allah, or was I really happy when people praised me? Did I get really upset when people criticized me? Do I want to do it or not want to do it because of somebody else's impression of what happened? You were doing some sort of khidmah and people criticized, man, that was really bad. You did a horrible job. And you're like, okay, I'm not doing it anymore. Or do you say, okay, thank you for telling me that, I'll try to do better. And because you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you just continue doing it anyway. You still continue to do it. Somebody comes to you and says, man, you did such a great job. And you're like, I want to do it again. And then you fight people and you argue and you're like, I want to be the one to do it because if I don't do it, or I'm the best person to do it, don't you know that all these people say that every time I go there I give the best talk, or I do this in the best way possible, like I know better than everybody else. Now somebody may not say that outright, but that is sometimes reflects the internal state of the person. The next is سطر الأنوار الباطنة بهيبة الظاهر حتى لا تسقط بالإظهار والإشاعة. So he has veiled the inner lights with the exterior, it's like this awe exterior, so that they would not lose their value through being publicly displayed and widely proclaimed. So he's saying, it's interesting, he's saying, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hiding the awliya, and he's hiding the awe that or whatever is present inside of them by the awe-inspiring exterior. So okay, but you're saying that the inner state is beautiful. Why are you talking about the outer state being this awe-inspiring thing? And he says, because what's actually happening when a person actually removes themselves from the public sphere, they remove themselves, or they don't want to be known, their heart is not attached to the way people think about them, and they are expressing their neediness. He's saying the neediness, the eating, the drinking, the walking, having a job, all of the normal things that we do in life, actually those are the things that are hiding their wilayah. But they're actually, that's the inspiring aspect of it. So he's calling light to that itself. And so this next hikmah, basically after instructing the person who's trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be very obscure, to hide, to not go into the public, he's now saying a deeper dimension of this hiding. He's saying it's not just that the person has to be very disciplined about this, but actually this is a very divine act. So you guys remember the first hikmah that we talked about? It was bury yourself. Bury yourself. Do not go into the public. Stay humble. Don't try to seek out public opportunities. Okay. Now he's saying actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hides this and does this for his awliya. So what we're doing in the beginning stages of our spiritual journey, by putting ourselves in this state, we're saying, Ya Allah, I want to mimic the awliya. I want to mimic what you want from the awliya. And so this is now another lesson that comes along the spiritual journey, is that a large part of the spiritual journey is us taking all of our wants, our desires, our hopes, our dreams, and changing them to be what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us. But I wanted this career, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something else for you. I want to marry this person, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something else for you. I want to study deen, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something else for you. So it can manifest itself in many, many different ways. And so then the person may ask, well then how do I know? How do I know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from me? And then how do I actually change my heart to be in that position? So part of that, as an individual buries themselves, they become and spend time and have more solitude with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can't know someone until you talk to them. And you can't know someone properly if you're trying to talk to them, and you're also trying to talk to somebody else at the same time. Your attention is divided. So if we're focused on what people think of us, and we're thinking, what does Allah want from me? It's not compatible. We actually have to leave what people want from us, shift our heart and say, what does Allah want from me? And think about it, and those things then start to become clear. So the same way this nur enters the heart, in the exact same way, the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us start to become more clear. And then